some ways it's really not that complicated. We have to, and sometimes we like our stretches, depending on what the kind of thing is. There has to be there's different levels of getting our head out of things. What now?
Dog's still stuck.
Dog's still stuck.
Weeks later. Poor Pooch, he needs prayer, doesn't he? Something to eat, imagine.
Getting unstuck. What's it going to take? I guess if you're not, you talked about if you're not desperate enough, you're not going to get unstuck. If you're kind of happy where you're at, or it's really not that, the pressure really isn't that bad. What I mean by desperate, what's going to get you desperate? Sometimes if you're frustrated enough, or it's life or death, what gets us to the point of desperation? We talked about what's going to get us unstuck is when we stop using our efforts, admitting our powerlessness. We got to get it outside of ourselves. If we can get ourselves unstuck, we don't need God, we don't need others, we don't need anything. And this week we're going to talk about how you get unstuck. We have to ask. And it's based on this verse right here. We know that the passage in 2 Chronicles 20, if you look at this whole passage in 2 Chronicles 20, starting from the beginning, there was this army coming to Jehoshaphat and the armies of Israel. And they had no way of getting around it. They were either going to face this army, they had to face the army somehow. How many of us sometimes when we're stuck or we don't want to deal with something, we just say, I'm going to ignore it, and we'll go away. Well, this couldn't go away. They couldn't ignore it. They were desperate. They acknowledged their powerlessness. We have no power. And they asked for help. Jehoshaphat asked the people to pray, and they asked God for help. I believe we need to ask others.
Amen.
We need to ask others, and the good part of others needs to come to us. We need to ask others to pray, not just to give us ideas. Not every idea is a good idea. Most everybody has an opinion, but not everyone's a great one. But we need some God ideas.
Amen.
We need some God ideas from people who pray. And this asking thing, as we get into the asking, I've got and I want you to think about what are the positives and the negatives about asking. Because there's positives and negatives about asking, you know. There may be positives and challenges about asking. There's some positives and there's some challenges. Before we kind of get into the asking, let me share a story with you. There was an elderly man who was casually walking along the country lane with his dog and his mule. Not sure how that worked too well, but anyway, walking with the dog, suddenly a speeding pickup truck careened around the corner, knocked the man down, hit his mule, and his dog was hit and put into the ditch. The old man decided to sue the driver of the truck, seeking to recoup the cost of the damage. Well, the old man was on the stand. The lawyer for the defense cross-examined the man by asking a simple question. I want you to answer yes or no to the following question. Did you or did you not say at the time of the accident that you were perfectly fine? And the man said, well, me and my dog and my mule were walking along the road, and the counsel said again, stop. I asked you, tell me yes or no, did you say that you were perfectly fine at the time of the accident? Well, me and my dog and my mule were walking along the road, and the defense attorney appealing to the judge says, Your Honor, this man is not answering the question. Would you please insist that he answer the question, yes or no, about him saying that he was perfectly fine? Well, the judge says, he obviously wants to tell us something. He turned to the old man and said, go ahead. So the man said, well, me and my dog and my mule were walking along the road, and this truck came around the corner, was going far too fast, and knocked us into the ditch. The driver stopped, got out of the truck, saw that my dog was badly injured, went back to his truck, got his rifle, and he shot it. Then he saw that my mule had broken his leg, and so he shot it. And then he said, how are you? And I said, I'm perfectly fine.
Yep.
Fill in the blanks.
The moral of the story is, sometimes asking questions isn't going to get the right answer. Sometimes we have the wrong question. Sometimes our question is completely off base. And we will never get the right answers if we ask the wrong questions. But that doesn't mean you don't ask. But along the way you might get corrected and you might say, well, maybe I'm able to go wrong. So what are some of the positives and maybe challenges of asking?
Go ahead.
If you ask and get an answer, it might not be the answer you want. Hey, Mom, can I go to the movies? It's really far away. So that's a weird answer. And then she says no. Sometimes it's easier to not ask.
Okay, you start asking and then you don't get the answer that you think.
You should get. Yeah.
And then it sort of works against asking.
Yeah.
It says, why are you asking if you just want someone to give you the answer you want? And then we're stuck with maybe the right answer, but we really don't want to follow through. And that's a challenge of asking. And then we know the right answer, but we really don't want to do anything about it. And then what do? We're still stuck, right? What do we do then? We got to go right up to number one and say, am I really desperate to get out of this hole? Have I given up my power? Or am I still in control of the situation? Am I willing to shift and go another direction and ask for help? Do I realize that I can't be in control anymore? That's the challenge of asking. The challenge of asking is that we can't go on to step number 4 until we get step number 3. Because number 4 is actually follow through. What was the answers? And sometimes the answers aren't just one answer. How many know that? How many here have ever had a piece of machinery like the refrigerator is not working? Well, the good news, it can be fixed. The bad news, there's about 5 things wrong. Meaning that one answer didn't solve it, there's about 5 things that has to happen. Positives and negatives about asking for challenges, yes.
I know asking for me at times has been that like asking for help is as if that I have a need, I'm a needy person. And that can be difficult at times.
Okay, you have to admit that you need help. And you're putting yourself at the mercy of others. It's humbling. Your ego has to go aside. You also have to be open. this story before I ever forget. It was many years ago. Many years ago. Probably 20 years ago. Here I am sitting with this lady. And she was wanting some advice or counsel. She asked me something. And I gave her, it was a clear answer. I don't even remember what the situation was. I gave her a clear answer. And then she began arguing with me. She began to argue with me about the answer. And then we kind of, then I tried to convince her that this was the answer. And then, I don't know, we went around for, 5-10 minutes. I said, okay, you're the counselor. And I want you to tell me what I'm supposed to tell you. And she said, no. You need to tell me. And I said, I can't. And we just kept going round and round. I don't know exactly. She just didn't want to do it. She didn't want to do the hard thing. We live in this instant society. We want answers now. My goodness, I have to work. Get out of the holes. It's going to take a job. Normally, if it's really easy, then just thank the Lord. Normal life isn't that way. Positives and challenges are not asking. What else? The great positive, you get to learn. You get to learn something.
You find out where your help comes from.
Definitely find out where your help comes from. You know, like I said, some of my machines this week were not working well. I've got an education. I had to fix some things, had to do some things. I can get an education when things are not going well. I asked a lot of help. I still need to call them money and ask for help for some certain things. I already know that. But, I'm going to have to ask for help the rest of my life. But I got an education. If everything ran smoothly, I'd be unprepared if something actually was go wrong. But you get an education. If you ask, you got to put on your education hat. Article in the Wall Street Journal. Researchers, talked about the researchers in Iowa, conducted a series of 6 studies that tracked 100 couples for the first 7 years of their marriage. They concluded that both husbands and wives feel lower marital satisfaction than when they are given too much advice from a spouse, as opposed to 2 women. Unsolicited advice is damaging. How many of you ever experienced that? Try to give someone advice and they ain't looking for it. The researchers focused on a fundamental biblical principle. Serve your spouse or put the needs of your spouse ahead of your own needs. Here's part of their conclusions. One way to get better advice is to first make sure your spouse actually wants your help. You can do this by asking a novel idea. Would you like some ideas on that? In other words, stop and listen. Sometimes listening can be even more effective than giving advice. Or instead of jumping in and giving advice, try telling them a story. This might not be appropriate for you, but what I did when I had a similar problem was, what if you're the recipient of unwanted advice?